So please give a big hand for Todd Akamesis.
So my talk tonight is titled The Red or Blue Pill Talk, Reload Your Reality. And not too dissimilar from, I guess, the image behind me, the film The Matrix, the idea that, like Neo, we're living a double life. But a double life, part of that we're not aware of. You might have a slight awareness of it, but it's learning how to open that aperture more and more so you become fully aware of who and what you really are. So my talk tonight is, for me, all the conspiracies that I've researched throughout the years, throughout my life as a remote viewer, as just a concerned citizen of the world. I find that, to me, the biggest conspiracy is the suppression of multidimensional consciousness, multidimensional reality, who and what we really are. And the lie that the church has perpetuated with, heaven and hell, the new sort of paradigm with science that, is all about physicality and what we can sort of measure. So my talk will be radically different from those lines. But I'd like to first give you a little bit of insight into my world before I continue with my actual experiences of multidimensional reality, because I think it's important that you have some background on who I am. One way that I love to actually help people sort of start to see realities within realities, to take people beyond ordinary reality, is through something that I developed about 6 years ago called a synchronicity walk. And the synchronicity walks are very simple. I'll put up notices in cafes. I live in London, so I'll put up notices in cafes, alternative bookshops, and the notice will be very straightforward. It'll just offer, it's an offering to people. Come to this place at this time, at this day, and we're going to use our intuition to take a walk across London, as our intuition as our guide. And in doing so, we allow miraculous things to happen, and we get to experience the magic that is already there, that might be only not seen or unseen because of our current belief systems and the blindness that can bring. So when people show up to these walks, I always get at least one or two people, as we're waiting for others to arrive, to ask me a question such as, so what's the plan? And as I always say to everyone else, there is no plan. I'll pull some dice out of my pocket and I'll say, we've got these dice. And these dice we basically use throughout the night. Whenever we get to a street corner, we'll roll the dice and we'll let the dice decide which direction that we go. So this way we get to take all control out of our hands. And this then removes our preferences, our expectations, which have a way of actually controlling the direction of the walk by throwing the dice and letting chance or luck or synchronicity guide us. Then we get to experience the magic that's there beyond our expectations, beyond our preferences, our personal likes and dislikes. So it's a very simple experience in the sense of, the ideas behind it. The guidelines are very simple. We roll the dice whenever we get to a street corner. We are open to experiencing synchronicities. Whenever we have an intuition, we follow it instead of doubting it. So trusting your first instinct instead of having the doubt come in, which then will probably get us to do something more fear-based versus that first response, which is probably a very loving, sort of response. So 20, 30, 40 people sometimes arrive. Quite a few of them I've never met before. Sometimes we have return visitors to the walks. And no walk is the same, but they all show people the synchronicity that is always there. Because to me, synchronicity is not something that we need to manifest through a process. It's always there. Reality is always there. And it's just the reality that we're experiencing based, again, on those preferences and those expectations. So a lot of people will come to the walks because I usually will run the walks in the evening time, 7:30 mostly in the weekday. So people are coming directly from work in most cases. And the walk is a wonderful way to help people recalibrate their nervous system, to recalibrate their way of thinking. They've been at a very commercial sort of place all day long, maybe a very competitive environment. And this gives them a way to actually start to let go of that egoic part of, what we think we are. And when I say ego, I'm referring to not the idea that psychology presents with regards to our personality, but the idea promoted by spiritual circles, spirituality, where the ego is that false self, that learned fear that we accumulate during our lives, that part of us that has literally cut itself off from the reality of love, of that true nature of who we are. And I find that through the walking and the process of letting go, letting the dice guide us, we start to access this deeper nature of who we are, our true self, and it starts to recalibrate us. And by the end of the evening, people are feeling themselves again. And I'll just give you a few examples of what we experience, and this is very typical of all of the walks. So we roll the dice at the very beginning, and we get our group number. And the group number is a way for us to communicate directly with the universe. In my way of thinking about the universe will communicate through signs and symbols like the crop circle symbols that we see around us in this hall. And if we're open to the interpretation, then it will unfold. We will receive the download. So we roll the dice and we get our group number. And let's say, for example, on one night we rolled the number 4. And as we were walking on that night, so we got to a street corner, and we rolled the dice again, and we had a reoccurrence of the number 4 again. And it was right underneath a bus stop for the number 4 bus in central London. So I said to people, okay, this is probably a sign. And when the number 4 bus comes, we should probably get on the bus. The moment I said that, the number 4 bus came around the corner. And that was perfectly timed event. And it's at this point people really started to get the flavor of what I'm like. If I say, let's get on the bus, I mean it. I'm very spontaneous in that way, and I'm very much like to be in that flow, which is always there. It's just whether or not we're experiencing the flow because of our state of mind. So I could already see people scrambling for their Oyster cards and wondering if they've got just enough money to get on the bus without being embarrassed if they can't get on. And this is important, every step of this. When these fears come up, it's like the idea of love. Love brings up everything unlike itself. And so when those fears come up, we're not asking in the body of a walk for the fears to come up and then do nothing with it except for perhaps embarrass someone. But for that to actually be healed in some way, whether it's other people said, hey, I've got a spare Oyster card, there's no worry. And you just having that belief, that faith that everything is going to unfold in a very loving, profound way. And let that recalibration of the nervous system just to naturally occur the deeper we step into that true nature of who and what we are. So on that particular occasion, the bus came around the corner, perfectly timed experience. As we're all getting onto the bus, it started to rain. And this was very amusing for me because I've done so many of these walks and I've learned so much about synchronicity through direct experience that to me, that was a sign of what we call the joker or the trickster aspect of synchronicity. That part that reminds you not to take yourself too seriously, to remember to laugh. And I was thinking about a parallel version of me in another reality that probably did not follow the signs of synchronicity on that occasion and is now getting wet on another level of reality with, the other synchronicity walkers. So, and I would have to smile and remind myself that if we would have trusted, we'd have been on the bus and would have been dry. But luckily it was this version of reality and we were on the bus and we were dry. So we got on the bus and we rolled the dice and we got the number 9. So I announced to everyone, okay, let's go 9 stops and then we'll get off the bus. And you can see some people getting nervous again. I locked up my bike back there at Trafalgar Square. I don't know where this bus is going. I live on the other side of town. And again, these are those fears that we've become so conditioned to. And you see as I start to relax and I start to really trust, it's almost as if people on the walk start to borrow my faith. Oh, Todd knows what he's doing. I'm sure he'll get us home safely at night. Sometimes people fall through the cracks, while we're walking and they just disappear. Maybe through fear. They're thinking, okay, this is too much for me. And that's perfectly okay. So we went to 9 stops. The moment we were getting off the bus, it stopped raining. And again, a perfectly timed experience of synchronicity. What was even more fascinating, when we all got off the bus, there was a wall just opposite from the door of the bus, where there was somebody had plastered a big sign that said, "Wait here for further instructions." You just can't make this stuff up. I mean, you can, but there's no point. So we're all there standing there at this sign, and I said to everybody, we have to follow the signs. So we stood there. And within just about a minute, one of the black cabs drove up, and their passenger got out. And then he looked over at us, and it was just perfect. We all sort of like the Red Seas were parting, and this sign, and he sort of just chuckled. And I said, "Yes, we are waiting here for you, obviously." And I said, "Look, we're not tourists. I know I sound American, but we're not tourists, and we don't want to go to Buckingham Palace. We're kind of randomly walking across London, and we're just sort of experiencing whatever happens just by rolling dice." And I asked him, "Would you mind just, without even thinking about it, without using any logical parts of your brain, just choose a direction for us?" And immediately he was just like, and he was in the spirit of it, and he sort of pointed this direction, and we thanked him, and we began walking. Within a few minutes, there was this loud thumping music coming from a top floor flat. And I said to everyone, perhaps we should gate crash the party. And again, people were like, is Todd serious? And by that point, they should know I'm serious. And the moment, just after I said that, this guy comes sort of running across the street from this pub. And he looked like he had a lot of purpose. And he looked at us and he was like, "What are you guys up to?" And I explained to him, I said, "Yeah, we're just about to gate crash this party." And he was like, "That's really interesting. My mates just bet me that I wouldn't gate crash the party." And I was thinking to myself at the moment, because as things like that happen, I like to make the connections. And I was thinking to myself, what would have happened if we didn't get on the bus? We probably wouldn't have been here. We would be somewhere else, and we'd experience something else. But what if we were meant to be here? Then we would have probably found another avenue. And I think the universe is, exactly like that. It's like our GPS in our car, like our sat-nav. If we miss the left-hand turn and we're meant to turn left, we can trust that the GPS will recalibrate, and it will get us back onto our path. But I like to think of these things during the walk as we're continuing, and I sometimes think, well, maybe we would have got on the bus, and maybe if that guy wasn't quite ready to put down his beer and come across the road, we would have stopped, something else would have stopped us for a brief moment, and then the perfect convergence would have still taken place. So with that further sign that we should gate crash the party, we rang a few sort of buzzers to get ourselves in, and somebody buzzed us in, and we went up to the flat, we knocked on the door. And I don't even need to embellish this stuff. This guy opens up the door, smoking a reefer, and it's like, "Hello." And I was like, "Hello," and explained to him what we were up to and wandering across London and how we managed to come to his house, his flat, and his home. And he was like, well, come on in." There was like 20 of us, and we went in and we had a bit of a party. So it was quite fun. Another experience, just to put it in context once again, on another occasion our group number was the number 2. We were already maybe 30 minutes into the walk. The walks usually last for about 90 minutes. And we got to a point where we were near Oxford Street and Regent Street. And again, we rolled the dice, and we had a reoccurrence of the number 2 again. And so I said to people, okay, let's look for the number 2. And as I said that, a number 2 bus, which was C2, went by. And so I said, okay, the universe wants us to see the number 2 somewhere here. And so we're looking around, and we couldn't quite see, the number anywhere, like on a beyond the bus. And somebody pointed out, well, there's 2 ladies over there just talking amongst themselves. Everybody else on Oxford Street, Regent Street are just sort of, a crowd going somewhere, a massive, humanity. And they were the only 2 standing still. So I took that as a sign, and I confirmed to this person, yes, we should probably go over there and have a chat. And we all sort of surrounded these 2 women. And I was like, excuse me. Really sorry to interrupt. Pardon the interruption. We're not tourists. And I explained what we were doing. And I thought she was going to probably point out one of the major roads, the intersection in one of the major roads. But she didn't. She pointed out this alleyway. And we thanked her, and we crossed the road. And when we got over to the alleyway, the building that was on that corner of the alleyway and the main road was 222. But we couldn't see it originally from where we were. But through this intuition of this other woman, it led us perfectly to that space. Now, the moment we got there, this man came running at full speed out of this shop, Selfridges, whatever it was, come out of this shop, full speed, running down this alleyway. And these two security guards had come running after him, so obviously he was shoplifting. And I was like, follow them, you know. And this is the fluidity of the walk the entire time. Again, to take all control out of our hands so we can experience what's already there. And what this is doing is helping us go deeper and deeper down the rabbit hole to experience, again, the magic, the rawness that's already there that sometimes we miss. We're not seeing these realities within realities because of the belief system blindness. The things that we come to expect through our mindset, especially if we're coming out of work, we're probably going to be in a particular mood. So this has a profound way of recalibrating people's thoughts, and by the time the walk finishes, they're in a completely different state of mind, and they're experiencing something completely different. So this is my world. If you'd ever like to experience this, please invite me over. We can go out in your local area, and we can have a synchronicity walk. I'm always open to traveling. So. Okay, so that's some of my synchronicity experiences, and now I want to get down to the talk itself, Reload Your Reality. So once again, to me, where I'm at in my life right now, there are so many incredible ideas, but one of the biggest conspiracies to me is that idea, of that suppression of multidimensional consciousness, who we are. It's suppressed by science, it's suppressed by religion to a large degree. The truth of multidimensional reality and the real beauty of multidimensional reality beyond that black and white concept that religion will give us. And in most cases, heaven and hell. And the only in-between is usually something like limbo or purgatory, which in itself doesn't sound very nice. So this is something I've researched for a few decades through different modalities, one of those being lucid dreaming. So I teach lucid dreaming. It's one of these things that I find we all dream at night. So it's not something that we have to sort of, in a sense, repress our belief systems to learn this or experience this. We're already all sharing that level of experience. Whether you're remembering your dreams is an entirely different thing altogether, and there could be reasons for that. It could be your sleeping position. The standard sort of sleep posture that we adopt in the West is not very conductive for recalling dreams. The more flat you are on your bed, even with one or two pillows, can create intracranial pressure, which can actually start to short-circuit your memory systems during the night. So more of an angled position of about 30 degrees off the bed is very beneficial for recalling dreams, as well as other health-related benefits, which I don't really have time to go into. So lucid dreams is an excellent opportunity to teach people that dreams don't just have to be something that we're unconscious to. We can actually wake up within the body of the dream while our physical body is still fast asleep. And from any else's vantage point who's awake around us, we just look asleep. But we become fully aware and conscious and lucid within the dream state to the point to where the dream environment itself becomes as physically real as waking reality. And to me, this gets really interesting because when we hear scientists talk about, when they're interviewed, I saw a Horizon program a couple years ago on the BBC where the question was asked of many physicists, quantum physicists, what is reality? And they all stumbled their words like, we don't really know. It seems like it might be, that we're experiencing, some holographic reality. And it's interesting to hear these ideas coming from certain areas of science. To me, this is, and I think it's very in line with the Buddhist sort of thinking, that this is a shared dream that we're experiencing in this level. And I'd go as far to say that this shared dream is a virtual reality space. I don't think this is base reality. I think this is something that we've opted into from another level of reality. And there's a lot of evidence that we can gain from having direct experiences with things like lucid dreaming, out-of-body exploration, remote viewing, channeling, mediumship, so many different modes. But my favorite modes are lucid dreaming, remote viewing, out-of-body exploration, and deep meditation. I think deep meditation is one of the things that really grounds us and is the base practice for all of these other activities. Whether I'm exploring remote viewing or lucid dreaming or astral projection, the meditative mind state gives me that grounding to where I can become single sort of minded focus, single point concentration, which in itself can create a very powerful effect and just through a relaxed state with a single point state of focus, you can enter an altered state. And once you start to realize and become aware of the altered state markers, the signposts, you can start to go even deeper. You can get to the point where the physical body and physical reality completely disappear off your radar. And you can start to experience reality beyond this level of the dream, beyond this level of the projection. And what I find really fascinating about lucid dream states, that the more conscious and aware we become within that state, the more hyper real and physical like it becomes, to the point to where it'll be as physically real as this room that you're in right now, physically real as the chair you're sitting in. And this content is being generated by consciousness. Your subconscious is driving that data that is creating that environment, which is no different to me than what's driving this environment. In a dream, you can meet dream characters which are very plasticky. They don't seem to have much awareness or energy behind them. Sometimes you meet dream characters that make you think they seem to have more conscious awareness than me. And you can sometimes receive very powerful information that is usable back in physical reality. And I think this is one reason why cultures around the world, indigenous cultures, put a lot of emphasis on the dream state. They know that it's a construct that can be accessed by other people in other levels of reality, other beings in other levels of reality. So I like to explore lucid dreaming with people because it doesn't matter what your belief system is. At some point, once you start waking up within the lucid dream state, you're probably going to have an experience of some nature which is going to make you question whether this is just a dream. I had an experience a couple years ago where I woke up within this dream. I started to become really aware, and I was teaching lucid dreaming within this dream. And I was really quite fascinated. I have to rewind a little bit. I got ahead of myself. As I was becoming more conscious within the dream, and I realized I was teaching, I was looking around at the room and thinking, I don't remember booking this. I don't even know where this venue is. How did I even get here? And it's through those sort of questions that started to actually drive the awareness more and more into the experience itself, to where I realized I was within the confines, the construct of a dream. And it was in that moment where I became hyper-conscious that my hands disappeared within the dream, and I started to panic a little bit. Although this is something that happens quite frequently once you start to become conscious in dreams or conscious within out-of-body experiences, you can lose a sense of awareness with regards to physicality. And all the other characters in the dream were very amused by the idea that I was panicking and just becoming aware that I was dreaming and I was teaching in the dream. I woke up that morning, and as I was journaling the experience, I had a text message come in on my phone, and I looked at it, and a friend said, Todd, do you remember anything this morning? I was in a classroom with you, and you were teaching lucid dreaming. And I remember just as I was writing that and reading that message thinking, this isn't the first time I've experienced something like this. I've had experiences where I'm fully conscious in a dream, and I meet friends from this level of reality, and I do experiments where I'll wonder if this is just a figment of the dream environment created by my subconscious, or if it's really them. Because if we can share the dream on this level, why can't we share the dream within, a nocturnal dream, a nocturnal space? And so I'll do things to get them hyper aware. I'll ask them, what's your name? What's your name? Fran. Fran, spell your name for me. F-R-A-N. Spell it backwards. N-A-R-F. Do you know you're in a dream? Probably not yet. Yes. Where's your physical? Oh, you do. Where's your physical body?
Absolutely no idea.
No idea. Think about it. Where do you live?
Eastbourne.
Would your body be in bed right now?
No.
No. Okay. Difficult dream character. At some point, you're hoping that the person realizes in the dream that their body is somewhere, that they remember going to sleep in their bedroom or in a chair somewhere in the lounge. They remember going to sleep. And they now realize that they don't remember the sequence leading up to that moment. Kind of like the film Inception. So it's really quite powerful when you start to wake people up, or what you think is a dream character, and you start driving awareness within that entity. And then later in the day, receive communication from a friend, that friend, who says, funny thing last night, I saw you in a dream last night, and you were asking me to do this and that. I'm sure if we took a survey, quite a few of you have probably had experiences of this nature. So when you start to have experiences to where maybe information is given to you within a dream, or you share an experience with someone else, these are gray areas that make us start to challenge this idea about reality and whether, consciousness is a epiphenomena of the brain, whereas in my world, the brain is a phenomena of consciousness. So the other way around. So lucid dreaming can really help to wake people up to this deeper level of who and what they really are. I find that other practices can do exactly the same. Remote viewing, when people start this practice and they start gathering information that they couldn't have done by sitting in a room on their own, and when somebody else then analyzes their data and it's an exact match for a target that they were never shown, that's a powerful validation. And it helps, again, drive people deeper into who and what they really are, beyond the illusion that we're taught from a very young age. And I'm sure that's why most of you are here tonight, because this is something that you feel too. So these are different ways that I like to explore. And I find that one of the most effective ways to navigate this level of reality is to remember that you are not exclusively of this reality. And this is something that I've learned without any shadow of a doubt, or relearned over the last decade in particular, where I've maintained a very high level of out-of-body exploration. In my very early days, when I was 6 years old, I started having experiences which were very different from dream experiences. In dream experiences at that age, I would sort of suddenly become aware within a space that was never my bedroom. And I would never see my physical body. In this other type experience that started happening from age 6, I would usually have some sort of powerful energy sensation of like maybe levitating and having a weird sensation in my stomach like butterflies. And then I'd spin a little bit and I'd see my physical body tucked up under my blanket lying in bed. And I knew it was different. Even the feeling of it was different. I'd walk through walls and I'd be in the garden. I could go and visit friends. I could go and visit them while they were sleeping at night. But curiously, I sometimes was able to communicate with them. And this is another phenomenon that I found really interesting, that when I'm out of body and I'm around physical people, because I'm now, in a sense, non-physical. I'm like a ghost. And I'm in the real time zone of the physical earth plane, to where I can experience what's going on around me as if I was still in my physical body. And at that point, sometimes you can literally communicate with a higher aspect of the person that you're encountering who's in a physical body. And I find this really deeply fascinating for the idea of when we realize in spiritual terms that we are interconnected. We can communicate with a deeper part of people who are already in a place of forgiveness, already in a place of mercy, already in a place of love, regardless on what's going on the surface. And when we really know this through experiences like this, which are validating, these spiritual concepts, to me it makes it more powerful. And this is why I love to teach things where people can have a direct experience. So hopefully maybe within the body of this talk I'll be able to share a couple ideas. If not, I've got a bunch of cards up here. Please, this is how you can enter my world if you like, and then we can sort of share an experience together. So please feel free to come and have a card. This is another part of my world. If you can see the toad on this tripod, this is a machine called a light machine, which is the name of this device is Pandora Star. It has 12 very powerful LED lights, which can help you enter altered states within seconds. We use it for managing stress, depression, anxiety. We can use the device for training your brain to operate much faster than it currently does. We can also use it with frequency states that for sort of exotic states of exploration like lucid dream work. So if you'd like to learn a little bit more about this, please, again, take a card. So yes, for me, the way to better navigate this level of reality is to remember who and what you really are. So my sort of awareness of this, in those first experiences as a child, I'd come out of my body. This is how I articulate it now. I didn't have those words when I was a child. I didn't know what it was, but I knew it was different from a dream. And as I would come out of my body and I would see my physical body, and sometimes there would be other beings or other humanoids that would be there who would then take me somewhere else, usually where other children were being taken to in classroom-type environments. And these are what I've later learned in life are what we refer to as sleeper classes. They're classes that take place after our physical body goes to sleep, when our consciousness starts to phase shift beyond the physical reality. Call it the astral body, whatever you'd like to label it. And we start to naturally gravitate to other parts of reality, the astral planes. It's a label that the Theosophical Society would have come up with. But they are just labels for other levels of consciousness that exist beyond this one physical level. Beyond my childhood experiences that took place up to around the age 12, when they started to shut down, whether that was through puberty, whether that was through the conditioning of this level of reality, through the bullying that I experienced when I was that age. And because I was so different from a lot of the other kids, I didn't know how to sort of interact in a way which didn't come across as strange. And that limited my experience of reality to some degree. And I think that was probably at the point where maybe a higher part of me decided we need to maybe close this down for a little while. Let him recalibrate. Let him, start to enjoy his childhood. And so all of this stuff completely fell off the radar. When I was 17 years old, I left home and I went hitchhiking. And I started experiencing something vastly different, a phenomena that we've already spoke about earlier, which seems to connect all of us, binds us all together across all time and space. And I'll get to what I mean by that as I continue to talk. So I'm now 46 years old. It was about 12 years ago, the aperture of out-of-body experiences and gaining access to these other levels of reality started to open up for me again. I found out about a program by the Monroe Institute in the U.S., which was founded by a guy named Robert Monroe. Anybody heard of Robert Monroe? So quite a few of you. Robert Monroe is considered the modern pioneer in out-of-body exploration. He's deceased from this level now, but when his consciousness was here, back when he was in his late 30s, back in the 1950s and early 1960s, he started having spontaneous out-of-body journeys. And it was these journeys that then inspired him to create the Monroe Institute. And the Monroe Institute run a lot of in-house programs on altered states, on accessing altered states through hemisync technology. And hemisync uses binaural sound, where you use headphones and you have one sound that's in one ear, one sound in the left ear, and it creates a differential, which your brain then starts to tune to. And they discovered by hooking Monroe up to EEG that when he entered a particular frequency state is when he was having these OBEs. That frequency state that was recorded was between 3.85 and 4 hertz, which is the theta frequency bordering on delta. So we use Pandora Star in the same way, in the same lights, if you like, to where we can help people enter those states even faster, more reliably through light, which can actually entrain more of the brain than sound alone can do. So as an adult, I found out that they had a home study program, which was 18 CDs. I ordered the program, and I remember the day it arrived, I was very excited because by that time, I knew the experiences I was having as a child were out-of-body experiences. But again, I just didn't know how to articulate that as a child. So as I was reading through the literature, I became a little despondent because I'm a very impatient person. And it suggested that you use the CDs sequentially, so from CD 1 to CD 18, and to take your time, maybe a few months, to explore all of them. And I noticed the 3 CDs that were related to the out-of-body stuff was CD 16, 17, and 18. So I was thinking, okay, I'm just going to blow right through this program. Night and day for the next week, I'm going to get right to those CDs and I'm going to get out of my body. And I remember the first night using the CDs, was lying down on my sofa, and within probably just minutes, I fell unconscious because of the powerful binaural sounds that my brain was experiencing and were altering my brainwave state. I woke up about 5 o'clock in the morning, lying on the sofa, quite cold, and irritated with myself for falling asleep. And this pattern continued for a few days, until the point I finally decided I probably need to have more respect for this program, probably do need to slow down. So I decided I was going to take my time with it, and I was going to explore it with more patience. It took me about 3 months to get through the whole 18 CDs, and during that time, I didn't have any out-of-body experiences. But some something in me, I could feel it, was pulling me forward in this direction. And I felt it was a direction that I needed to explore and I needed to go. It was about a year into this practice where I'd become very proficient at meditation, but I'd still not achieved a conscious out-of-body experience. It was at that point where I'd read a book by another out-of-body explorer called William Bowman, who wrote an excellent book called Adventures Beyond the Body. And in that book, he gave a few techniques, and I thought to myself, this is probably what I need, is some technique to go along with the sound technology. So I started to practice. On one day within that week, I went for a walk in my local area, and I probably bumped into a plant like poison oak or something, and I started getting a rash on one arm about a day later, and then it went to the other arm, and then it was on my torso and my legs. And I woke up one night with all this itching, and I couldn't get back to sleep. It was 4 o'clock in the morning. I went down to my sofa, I put the hemi-sync, I put the headphones on and decided I'm going to use the hemi-sync, I'm going to practice with the techniques, and see if I can at least alter my state enough to where I don't feel all the itching. I stayed awake to what we call mind awake, body asleep, where the physical body goes absolutely to sleep, and the mind remains awake. And it was at this point I must have just clicked out. I fell unconscious, but not for long. I was woken back up with full body sensations of vibrations, as if I'd stuck my hand in an electrical socket, but without the associated shock. It was just powerful vibrational energy. And my physical body was in paralysis. But what was really interesting beyond that, which I knew was one of the state markers for a potential out-of-body experience, I had an eye mask on, and I could see through the eye mask, and I could see the ceiling in my lounge. And I thought, okay, that's interesting. I can probably use one of the commands I learned in the book. And I used a command, and suddenly I was sitting halfway out of my body. I was literally at a 90-degree angle. I looked back, and I could see my physical body lying on the sofa behind me. I was really excited, so I stood up. And as I stood up away from my body, this powerful bright light suddenly came into the space, into my lounge. And this hand sort of just came through the light. I was, what the hell? And it really scared the bejesus out of me. I was like, nobody told me about disembodied hands, during this program. And it shocked me to the point where I was back in my body. I had the blackness behind the eye mask, but I could still feel the paralysis. And I was thinking, oh, come on, Todd. For a whole year I practiced this. And I got to this point, and now I let a little fear stand in my way. So I, within minutes, was able to recreate the vibrational energy that I felt earlier. And again, I could start seeing through the eye mask. And so I went for it again, and I sat up again for a second time. I was a little bit more precarious. I was looking around the room to see if there was any lights or hands, and there was nothing, so I stood up again. But as I stood up away from my body, once again the light came back, and the hand came back, and that hand just sort of sat there like this, motionless. And I remember just looking at this and thinking, there's a little bit of fear, but think about science. I don't believe much of that. Think about religion. I don't believe any of that. What lies on the other side of that hand? It was like a fear test. And so I put out my hand, and I was so amazed. There was a physical duplicate of my physical hand, a non-physical duplicate of my physical hand, but it was physically real on that level of reality. My energy body was a duplicate of my physical body. You can call it the etheric body, astral body. We have these different labels. I try not to get too bogged down with the label side of it. So anyhow, I put out my hand, and this hand reached forward, and it took hold of me very gently, and it maneuvered me further away from the energy field of my physical body, which can sometimes serve as a magnetic force to draw you back again. And then the hand withdrew, and the light withdrew, and I was there on my own in my lounge with my physical body lying on the sofa. It wasn't the longest out-of-body experience that I've had to date, and it wasn't the most profound, but what it was, it gave me the inspiration and the motivation to redouble and triple my efforts, knowing that I now had a tool to where I can access other levels of reality dependably if I so chose to do so and if I practiced more. By the first week after that experience, I was able to regenerate the state 2 more times. So I was able to initiate 2 more out-of-body experiences. 1 week after that, I was able to initiate 5 out-of-body experiences in a 7-day period. It got to a point where it seemed like I'd suddenly hit an energy threshold, and I was now able to leave my body at will. And I developed this routine, this ritual, if you like, where I'd wake up after about 6 hours of sleep. I'd go down to the sofa about 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. I'd do the practice. At some point, I'd exit my body. I'd look at my body on the sofa or the lounge chair, whichever where it was, and I'd just make sure it was there and it looked safe. And then I'd walk through a wall or a window or a door, and I would be in another room or I would be outside. Years preceding all of this, I was very heavily into all conspiracy stuff, very heavily into reading things like UFO Magazine. And I remember one of the first times getting outside my house and looking up and seeing the moon and thinking, I wonder if I can get to the moon. Did we really go to the moon? I can find out for myself. And I jumped up in the air like I was Superman. And then I was suddenly back in my body. And I was like, oh, for Christ's sake. But I didn't stop there. And I continued. And so it was about 30 experiences where it was very earthbound. I was very much in the near earth plane. I would go and visit friends in the night. One friend in particular who would actually put targets, like in remote viewing, on his mantelpiece. And I'd go over and I'd try to access the information and then wake myself up, journal it, send him an email. I would usually be able to nail some information which gave us both the impression that I was experiencing another version of reality, an altered state, and I was able to access information. But one powerful validation, there came a point to where there was no more targets coming from him for about a period of a month. And I went out of body and suddenly felt drawn to go and see him. And I arrived and I got this pull down into his basement, and his basement was flooded. And so I sent him an email the next day saying, look, I was out of body last night and I came to your place and there was water in your basement. And he wrote back very excited saying that, well, part of him was excited because his basement was flooded. He wasn't excited about the basement being flooded, but there was some torrential rain and it flooded his basement. And he said that was the first time his basement has ever been flooded. And so this is a verification out-of-body experience, which is very powerful. I wasn't looking for something, but I experienced reality beyond what I could have been searching for, which is in itself very powerful. I then started to have experiences of a different nature after those first 30 or so out-of-body experiences where I'd come out of my body, I'd do my ritual, I'd look at my body, and then I'd go walk through a wall. On this one occasion, I had these sensations, and I stepped away from my body, and I looked, and did a double take. I was, shit! My body was missing. I was like, crap! Somebody took my body! And I was like, where did it go? And it was all panic stations. And then this voice sort of came over me, and it said, you're no longer near the earth plane. You shot right on past it. And I was like, but I can still see my house. And I could see this image of my house. And this male voice said, that's just a dream. It's just like a dream. You're projecting the idea of your house because every time you come out of body so far, you've been in the near earth field of your house. And you've seen the non-duplicate version of your house, but you overshot it. And it's only your expectation that is creating this dreamlike thought form that's surrounding you right now. And I said, well, what do I do? Because I can hear his voice. It was like, you just need to let it go. Maybe ask to experience reality beyond that projection. And I was like, okay. And I thought of something, and suddenly the image of my house completely disappeared. And I was standing in this field, and there was a man there, the man that was talking to me. And he was a physical human, but not from physical earth. This is another dimensional level reality, to where from their perspective, they're very physical. From their perspective, we are very non-physical in nature. So he then proceeded to show me around the environment that we were in, as well as explain certain things to me. I remember returning from that experience and journaling endless pages, thinking, my God, I could write an entire book just on this one out-of-body experience, where he was explaining to me that the physical body that I'm in now, the current incarnation, is just one of my multidimensional aspects. And that I have a soul or oversoul or monad, whatever you want to call it, that is the sort of mothership, if you like. And this vehicle is like a scout ship. And it's gathering information. It's the one playing the human role. But that mothership is not human consciousness. It's non-human consciousness. And I had all this sort of information, during this experience. And I remember when I was journaling this the next day, thinking, I need more information. Because I think when you're starting to receive that level of information, it can get to the point where you start to question things. You're questioning so much that you need some good grounding. And thankfully, I had a few out-of-the-body experiences that came on the back of that one, which started to help put more of the puzzle pieces into place, because otherwise your imagination or your ego can start to create a story. And so I was shown through other experiences how to put those puzzle pieces together and start really grounding myself with the awareness that this is not the extent of who I am. I remember after my first year, I had about a year of experiences where I was now accessing not just the earth plane, the near earth plane, in the real time zone of the near earth plane, but I was starting to access other levels of reality. Realities that we would call, or religion would call, the afterlife, or that people like Newton would call the interlife state. You know, a researcher on the lives that we have between lives after we die on this level. And these are very interesting environments, because some of these environments are recovery environments where when people die from this level, they're in a confused state sometimes, and they're not remembering, fully the life that they just came from. They can fall into another level of amnesia, another foggy state of consciousness. Or they can remember their experience that they just came from, but they don't remember anything else beyond like parallel experiences. They're just remembering that one lifetime. And it's really quite interesting, this reconditioning process that we go through between lives, because we'll have personality states that can seep through from one lifetime to a next. To me, when I hear people say past life, and I know I've referred to it myself, and I've looked at some of the mechanics of this, we're dealing with aspects which are living in parallel to us right now. So it's not just past life in that sort of linear sort of sense. The soul and consciousness is much more refined and dynamic than just this linear progression. So on one experience, I came out of my body, and there was this really amazing tunnel of light, which was reminiscent of like a wormhole in science fiction. And it literally tugged me into it, and I went through this energy tunnel, and I could feel this powerful, loving force. And when I came out the other side, I was in this city. And this city existed on another level of reality. It was as physical real as this level of reality. And I met a woman almost on arrival who was telling me about how she's so happy she's here. She's only been here for about a week. I asked her where she came from. She said, I came from Earth. And she was explaining that she'd recently died. And she was in this new place, and she was just sort of getting familiar with this community, and she was making friends. And I was like, this is really interesting. I'm meeting somebody who's only about a week dead from our level of reality. And in the middle of talking, she suddenly vanished. And I knew what happened. Because many times myself, I felt this tug of energy on my energy field or my astral body when I've been out. And if I go with it, if I surrender to the sensation, it winds up taking me somewhere through teleportation. And I thought that's probably what just happened to her, because it just was so sudden. And so I locked on to the idea of this woman, and I sort of made this command, take me to her. And suddenly I had this powerful sense of motion, and I was back near the earth, the physical earth. And I was in a hall about this size, and it was a church with pews, and there was a closed casket at the front of the congregation, and it was her funeral. I was standing off to the back, and I was watching her wander around. She knew it was her funeral. She was fully cognizant. The mood of the place, of course, was what you would expect from a funeral. But she was wandering around, putting her hand on her loved ones, on her friends. And although unless they had their clairsenses tuned in, they probably weren't aware that she was there. But she was walking around, and she was saying her goodbyes. She was putting her hand on their shoulders. She was whispering kind things in their ears. She was letting them know that she was safe and happy. She was remembering and reminding them of experiences that they'd shared together. And you could feel the energy of this room starting to lift. We were there for about what seemed an earth hour. And by the end of that time, people were looking up, they were looking around, they were looking at each other, they were smiling. You could feel the whole energy was lifted. She then came over to me, and we both decided to go back to where we first met. And then when I woke up from that experience, it was just so fascinating to me. My next out-of-body experience, when I was able to ask information about this, I was told that most people who die and they make it to those interlife levels and they don't get stuck in between, which is rare. It's not something that happens to a lot of people. But when they make it to that interlife environment or that afterlife environment proper, which I would call the astral planes, just to use a label that I'm familiar with, my guidance on that occasion was telling me that most people who are very cognizant of their death will return for their funeral. And that gave me a lot of comfort, because when I was 10 years old, my father died. And I remember being at his funeral, and we have open casket funerals in the U.S. And I remember stroking his face and wondering if he was there in the room. And although I was having those out-of-body experiences at that age, they weren't something that I had a level of control over. But it was soon after his funeral, it was a couple of months after his funeral, where he visited me in my bedroom in the middle of night when I was in a state of paralysis. And he let me know that he was okay. And I really like this idea. Again, William Bowman has this sort of parallel with physical Earth. He said, we have the internet. And if we had a tool like the internet, to where here, when we go on holiday, what do most of us do now? We use the internet as a tool to research where we're going to go on holiday. We check out the photographs of the resort, the pool, the bars, the local beach. We look at the online ratings. Oh, this is only 4 stars. Oh, I want something 5-star. If we had a tool to where we could visit the afterlife and locate communities that we resonate with before we die, why would we not do it? Why would we not want to remember who and what we are beyond this physical version, this one version of many aspects, which is combined, and connected to a soul? And we have the soul family, which we have many parts of that. You could be sitting in a room with another part of you right now. This is also something that can come from having these journeys, an experience that I had within my first year of out-of-body exploration as an adult. And it was quite fascinating. My youngest daughter at the time, not at the time of that experience, but when she was, I think it was 5 years old, I remember picking her up from school, and she said to me, Daddy, there's a girl that keeps coming to me on the playground, but nobody else can see her. And she told me the girl's name, and she said, Amy, her name's Amy, and she gave me the last name, and she was like, Amy says that she died, and then her mommy and daddy moved away, and she doesn't know what to do. And I was like, I didn't ignore this. I mean, this was my world. I knew this kind of thing could happen. And I said to my daughter, I said, well, look, maybe next time I come to collect you, if Amy's around, you can tell me what she's saying, and I can say things, and she'll be able to hear me, and maybe she'll get some comfort and some closure, and she'll be able to move on. And so this was something that my daughter it was effortless, the clairvoyance that she was experiencing from that young age. And my son was exactly the same. I recall on one experience where we were having some poltergeist type activity in our home. And my son walked in from the garden one day when I was sat in my den at my desk, and he sort of just suddenly stopped. And peripherally, I was just sort of watching him. And then he moved on, and he went upstairs, and he came back down a few minutes later. And he said, Daddy, when I came in from the garden, there were 2 people standing behind you. And it really frightened me. And so I went upstairs, but there were 2 more people up there. And a week before this, I had an out-of-body experience where I had my first out-of-body experience where I had other humans, non-physical, what we would call ghosts, in our house, in close proximity to me when I came out of body. And it really frightened me, and it stopped me from going out of body for a whole week because I had so much fear. But once the energy started interfering with my family, I knew I had to confront it. And when I confronted it, I went out of body and I spoke to these individuals, just realized they were just humans like us, but they didn't know what to do next. They didn't have these energy tunnels open up that people report when they have near-death experiences that they went through, and they met a loved one, and the loved one took them, to a nice serene environment where they could recuperate. Sometimes people get stuck in these intermediate states. They get stuck because in my sort of community, we talk of the second death. The second death, where they need to actually shed the energy of what's called the energy body, or the second body state. And we have our energy body, which is also a dense energy form. We have different names for it. We see manifestations of it, such as the aura. It's the energy body that holds the 7 chakras and all the other sort of meridian points, etc. And this energy, which is interconnected with our physical bodies. On death, sometimes people don't immediately have that second death. And their consciousness resides within that dense form of the energy body, and it keeps them in this orbit of the real time zone of physical Earth. And this is that ghost application that we've come to be aware of with the paranormal experiences. The paranormal is just an artifact of a much bigger environment. It was, again, something that I studied when I was younger, but I could never quite put my finger on what it was. Through having out-of-body experiences, you start to realize that this is just an artifact of a much bigger environment, a much bigger system, to where this is a subset. Physical reality is literally a subset of a much bigger environment. That bigger environment is a subset of yet another bigger environment. And it's all frequency-based. So when I started having these experiences of meeting other individuals on other levels of reality, having the experience with the woman, and the funeral, being able to visit my deceased father and stepfather at one point, and it started giving me this sense that, these are temporary lives that we're living, and it's so interconnected to all this other stuff, but why is it we're not being told this? Why are we not being taught any of this? And we look at science for answers, but we have two levels of science. We have mainstream science, and then we have covert science. We have a level of science that we don't get to see from our TVs or from our magazines. So with mainstream science, we've already experienced what that is. There is corruption within science. Big business has corrupted science. Organizations who have their own agendas have corrupted science for their own means. There are some really good people that work within science, really good scientists, and some of them come forward. But unfortunately, as a whole, this is a field which is being repressed. But I found through my out-of-body journeys, as I started to expand my journeys more and more, into year 2 and 3, I started having some really interesting experiences where not only had I done a lot of remote viewing up to that point, and I was very aware of the U.S. military remote viewing program and the former Soviet Union program, I started to become very aware that there was another program that was running side by side of a different nature. And who here is very aware of remote viewing? And I'm quite sure most of you, yes, quite a few. So for those of you who aren't, remote viewing is a practice where you can use your natural psychic ability to expand your awareness beyond time and space and access information which you can't normally access through the physical 5 senses. And this is something that's been studied and practiced for decades by the U.S. military in particular. Those of you who are aware of remote viewing are probably very aware of a chap named Joseph McMoneagle, who is the U.S. Army's first remote viewer, who's done a lot of live demonstrations on TV, who shows the absolute ability that we all possess if we practice. Like with anything, the more we practice, the more we're going to get back out of it. So Joseph McMoneagle, who's been practicing this for almost 40 years, he did a live TV demonstration, I think it was about 10 years ago, for a Japanese production company in Houston, in America. Joseph taught them, the production team, how to generate targets. That would be something like taking a photograph, putting it in an envelope, and then after, maybe have a few more targets, he asked them to generate 4 targets in particular, to walk around the city or to go around the city, to do a recce, and for one person to choose 4 separate places around the city, 4 objects, 4 buildings, whatever. And then to take photographs and seal them in these envelopes, and then to put a target identifier on each one. When he came to the studio, those 4 targets were under lock and key with an armed guard, and they asked him in the studio with the audience to do his remote viewing session. But before they started, they had somebody from the audience come and choose one of the 4 targets, which was sealed, which McMoneagle would never see, got into a van with a film crew, opened up the envelope, and went to the location instructed in the envelope with the photographs. On arrival, they now have the split screen from our perspective at home on the TV. One perspective of the audience with Joseph McMoneagle, the other perspective of this person with the TV crew, the film crew down at the real location. McMoneagle is now starting to write information, and the first thing that he's starting to pick up on is that this seems like there's a river or a canal, but it seems very built up, artificial, man-made, sort of enhanced. And as you can see the live feed, they're standing next to a big shipping lane, a canal, and so he was right on, target. And then he said, okay, I also sense that there's this flyover. There's this bridge or something coming over this waterway. Again, he nailed that. He reported it as being something like foot passage for traffic. Cars wound up being for trains. But again, he nailed the actual structure that was over the water. He then just started to describe there was something like a boat that was moving across the water surface, which was digging. And there was a dredger that was now in sight on the live feed. And then a moment later, he's suddenly like, whoa, 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 what is this? There's a lot of mechanical noises, something metallic really coming into view right here. And on the live feed, you see this huge oil tanker suddenly park itself in view. And McMonagle's picking all of this up. He pretty much nailed the target. At the end of the production, the producer asked him, what would you normally do in the U.S. Army after such a good result? How would you celebrate? And McMonagle said, well, we would go out to dinner. We'd go for a steak dinner or something. And so the production team was like, great, let's go out to dinner. So they took him out to dinner. And while they were conversing over the meal, McMonagle said something that, really perked up the producer's ears. And he said, whoa, whoa, back up. What did you just say? McMonagle said, I didn't actually do the target live in front of the audience. He said, I was a bit concerned that I might have performance anxiety, so I did it the night before. And the producer was like, whoa, wait a second. We hadn't even chosen the targets yet. How could you do it the night before? And that was quite a powerful, thing to hear, that time and space is not fundamental. Consciousness is fundamental. Time and space is not. He was able to access the target before it was even selected. He then said, and just to make sure that, I was bang on, I did the other 3 targets as well. One was this, one was that, and the producer's mouth was just, like jaw wide open. So it's a very powerful practice. And so I was well aware of this program. I'd also asked to be trained by one of the ex-military people, but couldn't find any at the time that, I really felt a connection with. So I found somebody in the end that was trained by a direct member of the personnel, who was probably one of the most amazing psychics I'd ever come across in my life. So she trained me, and I started getting really deep into this stuff. And then when I started having my out-of-body experiences, I realized there seems to be another program. They seem to have an out-of-body exploration program in addition to the remote viewing program. And the evidence that was being gathered was partly also from Robert Monroe, years and decades before. In his first book, Journeys Out of the Body, he reports getting out of his body one night while on business, and he was staying in a motel, and he was not too many miles away from the presidential compound. I think it's called Martha's Vineyard, which is like Chequers here in the UK for the Prime Minister. It's like a little retreat. And so he thought, okay, I'm out of body, I'm going to go and visit John F. Kennedy. This was 1961. So as he approached the compound, he was suddenly stopped by a non-physical guard who said, the president is not seeing people right now. And that was really quite interesting. When I started having out-of-body experiences, there was one experience in particular that really made me take notice to why would the U.S. government, and I'm just focusing on the U.S. government in particular because that's where I have a lot of experience with my out-of-body experiences in particular, and because I'm American. So I started to think to myself, if I can get out of body myself, I'm just a private citizen, I have no reverse engineered ET technology, I have no hundreds of millions of US dollars with no oversight. What kind of technology can they create versus an average citizen who, through spontaneous out-of-body experiences, can go anywhere around the globe, or flat Earth, whichever your preference, in real time, and experience in real time any building, any environment, any person? Wouldn't I become a threat? Every single person in this room, whether you're aware of it or not, you have unconscious out-of-body journeys every single night. Every sleep cycle you enter, which is 90 minutes in duration, this is where your second life begins to take place. Your physical body goes to sleep. Your energy body then goes out of phase with the physical body, like a helium balloon just floating above your body in your bedroom. And for most of us, this is where it will remain for that duration of that 90 minutes. You then go into dreamland. Your subconscious starts to create content, and your literally dream is taking place within the energy body, not within the brain of the physical body. This is why we can sometimes share dreams with people that are sleeping next to us or in the next room or even miles away, because the dream is not taking place within the brain. It's not a chemical reaction taking place within the brain. It's something far more interesting than that. So over the years, I've probably trained a few thousand people on how to have out-of-body experiences. And again, if I can do this with very little money, with other people sort of coming to my workshops and learning how to do this and then start to have experiences, why would it not make sense that the US government or other governments would not have their own militarized version of astral projection? I had an experience within the first 2 years of my out-of-body practice as an adult where I came out of my body, and I was living in Wembley near London at the time. And I was aware that I was in the near-Earth field, and I thought to myself, I want to go to London itself and sort of wander around. And when I got into London, there was a new build that was in the financial district. And as I was passing this building downstairs where the lobby was, there was this big glass sort of face to one of the walls. And suddenly I felt that I was being watched. And there were two other people who were out of their body. And this was one of the first times I encountered other people out of body who were aware that they had a physical body and they were conscious while they were out. And I suddenly had this sort of voice in my head, like telepathic stuff. And they said to me, "We've been watching you." And I was like, okay, who are you? And they didn't exactly tell me who they were, but they said, "We'd like you to come with us. We'd like to show you something." And it didn't seem like they were extending a friendly invitation. It seemed more like an invitation that I can't really refuse. And so I said, okay, fine, I'll go. And there was a sudden powerful energy sensation, and I was then in a room away from the earth field. I knew by that time what that energy felt like, being in that frequency. And it felt completely different. And I was in a physical room on another level reality, a parallel version, if you like. And there was U.S. military personnel walking around in this room. And all of them were out of their bodies. And it was explained to me that they did actually have technology that they could use to help their personnel get out of body and stay out of body for extended periods of time. One of the first things I thought about, yes, even if they could get people out of body, maybe it wasn't ultimately dependable on where it took them. Of course, they could guide themselves to certain places. But sometimes they're going to go off-piste. They're going to find themselves in level reality where it has nothing to do with their military, upbringing. It has nothing to do with their job. And they're probably going to have to sort of retrain people, who have, more powerful experiences than what their training has suggested they'll experience. So anyhow, I'm in this facility, and I'm being shown around, and things are being explained to me. And as we're walking around this facility, we walked past this one point where this man was sort of in a sort of standing as if he was paying attention to something. And as I walked through his energy, I suddenly got this download. It was like this connection telepathically. And he was communicating telepathically with someone else that was not in the room that seemed to be, because of the conversation, related to Mars. And I was really fascinated, but at the same time, I was like trying to duck out of the energy. I was like, I probably shouldn't be listening to this. And then when the tour, if you like, came to an end, and I was standing there in this room with these other American military personnel, and they point blank asked me, they said, "We've been keeping an eye on you. You've got good ability. We'd like you to join us." And I was like, no way. I didn't say it out loud, but I knew, I could already feel it, that because of the telepathic connection, they already knew my answer. And I was sort of just standing there really awkwardly thinking, they're going to smite me right now. They're going to cut my energy cord. I'm dead. I'm doomed. I'm not going back to my body. All this, story building in my head. But they could feel my conviction. And I also think they felt that I was never a threat in this sense. I wasn't there to sort of go and peer behind Area 51, although I would. But I'm not any great threat. So they were like, okay, you can go. And they literally, I was assisted back to my body. I woke up in my body. And it was a very strange sensation to realize that we do actually have military personnel on the ground here on this physical level reality that are able through technology to have out-of-body experiences at will. forget the level of practice that I had to build upon to achieve this. This is something they're using with technology. And this, although this is a powerful device, this pales in insignificance in comparison to what they've developed. But they do have, in addition to remote viewing programs, they do have an out-of-body exploration program. And again, we're dealing with mainstream science versus covert science. Things that we're never going to see, or that, we have through whistleblowers, or people like, Greer, who shows us things that are taking place. But to actually have the experience for yourself, to be in environments where you don't question that this is reality. One out-of-body experience may not prove anything. 10 out-of-body experiences may not prove anything, but you get to a point where you start validating what's taken place. A shared out-of-body experience is a very powerful thing to experience. My son, when he was 8 years old, because of the ability that he already had, it didn't take much to train him how to have out-of-body experiences. The very first time he laid down with using technique, he got out of his body. So there was, on one day, I realized after a few years, I made this connection finally. My youngest daughter had this birthmark on her left temple. My son had the same birthmark on the opposite side, on his right temple. And I got really super curious, and I thought, I've been able to go out of my body and get information on people before. I'd really like to see what this is about, because it's very curious. So I got out of body, and I accessed what we would call the Akashic records. It's just that zero-point field where everything is connected to each other. So our subconscious mind's connected to yours. And I connected through my subconscious to their subconscious and gathered this information, and suddenly was immersed within this three-dimensional environment, which was as real as this one. And I was now seeing these two individuals, a male and a female, down on their knees with these very angry people standing around them, and shot them at point-blank range and murdered them. And that was my son and daughter, who were married in that lifetime. And they had got involved with, this gang, and they were kind of like Bonnie and Clyde type figures. But they had this goodness in them, and they were trying to actually run away from this gang, and when that was found out, they were executed. I didn't quite tell them the horrific content, but my oldest son, I did sort of taunt him. I said, "You were married to your daughter in a past lifetime." So these military programs exist. It's not just remote viewing programs. And through all of my experiences, one thing that started to become also very apparent, which was only starting to click more and more over the last few months, I started asking myself a question. Why should the physical plane of existence be too different, too dissimilar to the astral planes? I realized when I think it was within the third year of my out-of-body practice, I started getting really curious because of my conspiracy days, and I was thinking, I've always wanted to go and visit the Antarctic. It always seems, because of that treaty that's in place, where it's not being exploited for all of its resources, which apparently should exist, but nobody's exploiting it for oil or minerals. Why? Why is it that you can't just go there as a private citizen without the rigmarole that goes with it? And so I started getting really curious and having out-of-body experiences focused purely on Antarctica. And out of the times that I visited, it was probably upwards of around 10. Every single time I encountered non-human energy when I was out of body, so non-humans, ET, whatever you want to call it. And I started having very manipulative type experiences taking place every time I would visit Antarctica. And I would usually be sort of pushed away or traumatized in a way where it was building up, the energy was building more and more. I didn't really want to go back. I remember after the last experience, which was quite traumatic, and I was actually was being held in this room. It was, again, non-physical. It wasn't a physical room because I was out of my body, but it was very physical to my astral body. And I was being held in this room with these non-human entities which were quite unfriendly. And they could very easily at will enter my mind space, and the pictures and all the energy of it was of superiority. And it was unloving. There was a time just after that where spontaneously I was out of my body, and suddenly I was on a trajectory to Antarctica, but I was on like an autopilot mode. It wasn't something I was trying to focus on. but it seemed like there was an energy behind me that was propelling me. And it actually got past what seemed these alien defenses, and I went further into the interior than before. And I crossed this boundary point where it was quite fuzzy, and I suddenly arrived into another parallel version of Earth. And I remember looking back at that experience recently because of some of the flat Earth stuff that I'm currently studying, and wondering, because of all the information surrounding this, which just does not gel, which does not sit straight with a lot of us. And looking back at that experience and those particular Antarctic experiences, and now having this new energy with my out-of-body practice where I want to know more. I want to have a lot more earthbound, real time zone experiences to start pushing past those boundaries. And some of that non-human energy, it can be very manipulative, but some of it can be the opposite. Some of it can be very loving, very friendly. And this was what gives me a lot of, inspiration these days for having these journeys, because it realizes we're not alone by any shape or form, but that there are energies out there that love us very much, that look after us and guide us. And I'm not just talking about our guides or other spirit beings, but there are non-human entities that are looking after us. And again, I'm sure this is nothing new to a majority of you in this room. When visiting the astral planes, when you don't hold as such a particular idea about that level of reality, your angle of perception can give you a very flat environment. And I think this is one reason why it was initially called, the astral planes, because your entry point can sometimes give you that perspective. And as you start to become more tuned into the environment without the expectation, you start to experience the astral cities, the other afterlife environments that exist there, but they're not always presented to you as some sort of astral globe environment. They're usually of quite a flat nature. And I started thinking again, why would the Earth plane have to necessarily be so different? If this is a construct of a reality no different from those levels, if some of the artifacts that I experience on the astral planes don't seem to be too dissimilar from these levels. Sometimes when I've moved from within one astral environment, like for example, several times when I've moved upwards within an astral environment, up into the sky, and I've encountered some sort of almost like a force field. And as I start to change my vibrational frequency and move through the force field, I enter the ocean of another environment, of another frequency plane. And it's really fascinating then looking at this idea of the firmament that they talk about with the flat earth theory. And the idea that we're contained within this sort of dome, and on the other side of the dome is possibly water. And this is quite an ancient idea. This is not something that was developed over the last century by flat earthers. This is something that goes back quite a bit into our history. So it's this kind of stuff that now really fascinates me and is driving my current direction with out-of-body exploration, to not focus so much on those inner planes of reality, but to focus more here on what's going on around us here. 10 minutes, okay. The moon. I'm a curious soul. I had to go back. Now, several times I've aimed for the moon and completely overshot. And on one final occasion, and I haven't been back since, I was actually doing something completely different when I was out of body. I was with some children and I was showing them how to move around the planet. They were literally, most of them were unconscious from my perspective, semi-conscious in a sense from their perspective. If they would have remembered it when they returned to their bodies in the morning, it would have probably seemed like a dream. And I was showing them how to navigate around the earth. And this one child spoke up and he said, "Can we go into outer space?" And I was like, "Yes, we can!" And my energy just sort of propelled me like a rocket up and away from these children. And I completely shot the earth plane, and I was in another level of reality. And I was just thinking, I could just see the newspapers on the astral planes that morning. Astral teacher, earthbound teacher leaves his children in the upper atmosphere, unattended. And I was suddenly in this warehouse that was perhaps 4 times the volume of this space. And there was this illuminated version of the moon, which was occupying this space. And this man started walking out of the shadow, and he said to me, "This is the nearest we want you to come to the moon. This is a real-time model of your moon, but this is as close as we want you to get. And I had a lot of questions for him. There was recently, I came across a friend who shared some of his experiences, the moon, with me. And he said, Todd, I've probably tried to go at least 20 times. And so far, every single time I asked, take me to the moon during an out-of-body experience, he's taken to a room where there's a photograph on the wall of the moon. Every single time. And it's made me wonder, why is it that there seems to be so much of a force stopping us, preventing us to actually experiencing the moon? It's something that I haven't been able to quite put my finger on. Even the data that I received on that particular occasion, which I don't have enough time to go through. I literally have 10 minutes left in total. Right, okay. That's all right. One of my absolute favorite out-of-body experiences happened years and years ago. And it was what really inspired me to take this journey to the depths that I've taken it to so far today. It was through a series of reoccurring out-of-body experiences where I was back in the same environment 4 times. The first time I arrived at this place, I was with a guide who instructed me that this environment was what's called a simulation environment. It's a simulation environment for those who are about to reincarnate back into a physical body on this level of reality. And that they go through a series of simulations, which is a simulation of the lifetime that they're about to incarnate into. The place of their birth, where they'll grow up, people they'll meet, and skills that they'll want to practice. Skills that they're choosing at that point to take with them into that level of reality. And on the first time I arrived at this place, my guide introduced me to this woman. Her name was Deborah. And she was just about to go out onto this rowboat, out onto this lake, which was in this environment which is as physically real as Earth and looked like a physical Earth environment. Couldn't tell the difference. And as I was on this in this boat with her, I could feel this very strong connection. And I remember Deborah describing, her most recent life and the memory of it, and how she's very excited because she's traveling back, she's reincarnating back into the Earth plane on this adventure to team back up with her husband from that lifetime. And she was explaining how they were both murdered in that lifetime. And I said to her, I'm really sorry. And I thought, why am I saying sorry? She's quite happy and alive. But it was just like a knee-jerk reaction. And then suddenly her appearance started to shift. And my guide had already said to me that this is probably going to happen when you're out on the boat with her because she's going to regress in years. And he said to me, she's already attached to a baby in the womb of her upcoming mother. And she's still able to come and go from the womb as this adult consciousness to train in this environment before she reaches physical Earth. She knows where she's come from. She knows where she's going. And so as I was on the boat with her, her age started to regress, and she was like 6 years old. Beautiful, sort of mousy brown hair, crystal blue eyes. And again, I felt this really powerful connection with her. And she was explaining to me that one of her practices was going to be the equivalent of what we call clairvoyance on this level of reality. And I can remember returning from that experience and writing everything down, and I was really, it was so powerful to realize I was communicating with a soul that was right now attached to a baby, a body within a mother's womb on this level of reality. Within the period of months, I was able to get back out of body and revisit that environment a few more times, where I met up with Deborah again, and I was learning about her new life and the life that she came from. And on the 4th time going back, she was gone. And I called out for, where's Deborah? And one of my helpers came and said, Deborah is now reincarnated back into the physical. She's no longer here. And I was like, oh, that's so fascinating. But at the same time, I felt this connection was so strong. And I think my guide consensus, he says, would you like to go and meet her in her physical body, in her physical life? And I was like, yeah. So literally we traveled back into the near Earth plane from that environment. And I was now in a room on physical Earth. So I was in the near time zone, the real time zone, in my energy body, in my astral body, overlooking physical Earth, if you like, in this room, in this bedroom. And in this crib was this baby. And I started to communicate with the higher consciousness of this baby. And the higher consciousness aspect, which was Debbie, recognized me as like, it's good to see you again, Todd. And of course the consciousness of the baby was completely different, but I was accessing another part. And when we made that connection, then this little boy walked into the room, and he was my 5-year-old son. And I looked at him and was like, what the hell's Luke doing here? And then suddenly it dawned on me that the little girl in the crib was my daughter that was now, actually was born on this level of reality. And I was able to meet her before she incarnated back into a physical form. It was one of my most profound experiences to realize that when I look at other people now, even if it's a non-human entity, when I'm out of body and I initially might feel fear, or I might feel some sort of superiorness coming from me, I look to this experience and I realize and I make that connection that I may not know who this person is from this level, but I'm probably connected to them through one way or another, whether it's this lifetime, a parallel version of this lifetime. Multidimensional consciousness is extraordinary, and it's being repressed. You are living a double life. You're having out-of-body experiences unconsciously every single night. You're just not remembering them. You're probably barely remembering your dreams. There are different reasons for why we're not remembering these experiences and why we've been lied to. But ultimately, this is for us to start taking this power back. We're either spiraling down in fear from what we're focusing on, or we're spiraling upwards in love from what we're focusing on. In my heaviest conspiracy days, I was deep into fear. And I've learned that I can look at this stuff nowadays with love instead of looking at it just through fear. And it makes a powerful difference. It's no longer controlling me. I'm now in a position to where I can work with this energy, work with what's happening on this level of reality in a way which is actually transforming consciousness. And this is something we're all here to do. To be these agents of love and not just at the mercy of our fears. Do I have any time left, or is that it? 2 minutes. Anybody have one question? Sorry, shortest Q&A ever.
Yep, there's somebody here. Hold on.
Anybody? Hands up?
Yep, hold on.
Thank you so much.
Can you
George.
make, whatever you do, can you make it a question?
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
The flat Earth, when you've been above Earth, when you've been in your astral body flying above, have you witnessed Antarctica circulating the Earth or down south?
Good question. In a lot of cases, you'll find that it really is dependent on the vibrational field you're experiencing. And this is what it confuses a lot of lucid dreamers and a lot of out-of-body explorers. When we move out of our bodies, it really depends on the level of reality that we're in at that time and what we're going to experience. The near-Earth frequency, if you're in the near-Earth frequency, the closest frequency to the physical Earth, you will experience it as a duplicate. And you will experience it in what I'm labeling the real time zone, which is somebody else's terminology. And therefore, you can then experience it for what physical Earth is. So if I was above the planet, I would experience it as the planet is. But I can also project. I can project unconsciously the idea, my expectation over that environment and see something completely different from the reality that is actually there. Mm-hmm. I've had experiences that show me one thing and then another experience shows me something else. It's learning that, again, reality is dynamic. We can be experiencing a parallel version of Earth, which might have a completely different makeup, a completely different rule set. To answer your question in a better way than that, on occasion I have seen a globe. On occasion I've seen a disc. And again, that's based on my expectation. I have to get to a point where I'm accessing the truth beyond my personal projection. My preferences, my expectations. When we can start to get to that level, that quality of experience, we can start to experience the truth of what is there. It's no different from us being on this level of reality and projecting our stuff onto other people. Our anger, our judgments, our everything. Reality is there to be experienced beyond our projections. We got this constant story going in our mind of what we think reality is, what we think we are, what we think other people are. And it's a matter of getting to a point where, again, we're in that energy of love where it's not that has to be this. We don't have to have an out-of-body experience to experience a parallel reality. We have it going on right here on physical Earth. We have a parallel reality which is based in fear, and we have a parallel reality based in love. And it really is dependent on what we're conscious of experiencing in that moment. But it's the best answer I can give you at the moment. I'm hoping maybe within the time that my first book is released later this year that I'll have some more definitive answers about this plane of reality. Take a card, stay in touch.
Ladies and gentlemen, Todd Akamesis.
Thank you.